They have no curve on discussing. Musicians nobody ever heard of. Okay. So we.
Well, actually, let's start at the beginning. You know,
Sure.
I'm married to a native Washingtonian, so I know how important that is to folks from DC. So let's tell us about, you know, where you born here and what high school you went. Talk about growing up with your parents.
Sure, sure.
Things like that.
Good evening. First of all, thank you all so much for coming out. And I made a joke about bringing Kleenex. I do have a bandana in my back pocket, so I may have to yank it out in talking about my family. But I was born in Augusta, Georgia.
Oh, really? Okay.
And October, we moved to DC in August of 1958. My mom got a job with DC Public Schools. And I'm here because she got a job offer here and one in Columbia, South Carolina, and they couldn't find a babysitter for me. So the no, South Carolina's no meant we came here. So she taught DC Public. My father worked at Pepco. My mother, just thinking about music, my mother played classical piano. She was really self-effacing about it, but I think she was good, and I could talk to her. My father and his friends were kind of, once they kind of got settled here, they'd hang out at Bohemian Caverns and places like that. I could talk to my mother about my emotional connection to music, and she would, I'd say, well, I heard this thing in a piece. It might be jazz, it might not. And she'd say, oh, you're talking about, and she would explain what it was technically.
Okay.
So but yeah, that's how we got here. So my mom taught school, language arts.
Okay.
And
What school was she teaching at?
she started at Crummell, which is in Ivy City, and then she's one of the first black teachers. They moved west of Rockby Park over here, so she came. It was Oyster, and she ended up at Merch. Okay. So not far, 36th and Davenport.
Right. Yeah. And your dad working for Pepco?
He was an engineer. He started with called National Radio Institute when we got here, and then he got a job as an engineer at Pepco. My father played the record. He played the stereo. My mom played piano. My father played the stereo. And he and his buddies would do like Friday, Saturday nights, cut rate scotch in the basement. And my brother and I would sit at the top of the steps and listen to music. And they always knew when I was up, sitting up there. So my father and his friends would be listening to whatever it was, like Earl Garner or something. And either my father or one of his friends would yell upstairs, you know who we're listening to tonight? And, you know, I was like the nerd, so I'd say, well, you know, I knew the personnel. Like, that's Reuben Jackson, blah, blah, blah. And they'd say, oh boy, you don't know nothing about jazz. But it was spoken lovingly. So when people ask me, how do you learn about music? I say, I went to the university. Or, boy, you don't know nothing about jazz.
Your older brother into music also?
Yeah, he was 8 years older. We would call each other, a lot of our nicknames were jazz musicians. So I'd say, your turn to take out the trash, Shorty Baker. He played trumpet with the Duke Ellington Orchestra. Or he'd say, you got a head like Carmel Jones or something. So the language was there. He was like my idol in many ways. Musically, he was like my protector. And I would try to write music for him, you know, as he's a clarinetist. And a lot of the pieces they weren't confined to the proper key signature, but he would kindly pick up the clarinet and play some polytonal madness and say, Reuben, this is really beautiful. So music was always around us, and you know, my parents belonged to, some of you remember record clubs, like the Columbia Record Club. So you'd get like a box of records, and it might be, so you get like Mingus, Rachmaninoff, might be Earl Scruggs. And I thought I thought everybody was like that. And I would play records with my friends and they said, Reuben, what the heck is this stuff you listening to? Or, you know. So, yeah.
Like your older brother, did you pick up an instrument? Did you play?
Yeah, DC Public, when you got to 4th grade, you could choose an instrument, and I wanted to play violin because I heard Ray Nance on this record, Ellington Indigos.
Sure.
And I thought, so I told the band teacher I want to play violin, and she said, boys don't play violin. So my mom took off the next day. My mom was like a short dynamo. She took no guff. And she told the band teacher, whose name I won't call because it's a big small town and people know people. She said, you never heard of like Isaac Stern? And she started naming all the people, Ray Nance and stuff. But they still wouldn't let me play. So I got my brother's hand-me-down clarinet. He was always first clarinet. I was second clarinet, you know, in the orchestra. But so yeah, I played clarinet until 7th grade. Then I played tenor sax for 2 years, and then the guitar, piano. So I still play. I call it rudimentary piano, and enough to keep my reading skills up. And I sing badly in the shower. I won't do that to you tonight.
What schools did you go to here in DC?
I went to Truesdale Elementary, what was then Rabeau Junior High School for 2 years, and then I went to Gordon 9th through 10th, and Western before it became Duke Ellington School for the Arts. And yeah, Roberta Flack was my 7th grade homeroom teacher at Rabeau. And she was becoming Roberta Flack. And she had that big perfect afro. And you're sitting there and saying music and hormones and you're like, oh my God. Anyway, because your voice is weird if it's 7th grade.
Wow. Gosh. I'm fascinated with Western High School. My wife there and Michael Myers were both there 10 years before you were there. Was it fairly racially balanced by the time you got there? Because there was only a handful of African Americans in Western.
I'd say 90% black.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And we were, by that time, I had kind of started listening, you know, kind of seriously, if you want to put it that way, to jazz. But what I was listening to and what a lot of my peers were listening to were not the same thing. The popular stuff was like the pop things that Donald Byrd was doing with the Mizelles on Blue Note, and I was bringing stuff like one day I brought the 1947 Charlie Parker stuff, like Graceful Blues, Cool Blues, and they're like, Reuben, this is like stuff from the Mesozoic era. So I never played, or Coltrane Live at the Village Vanguard again.
Well, that was one too that my friends couldn't.
Yeah, they were like, these are black astronauts. Where are they going? But I never really fit in so well with music. I mean, again, because we listened to everything at home, and I thought everybody was like that. And is Dr. Phil here? I might get like really sad about being alienated as a youngster.
So after Western High School, you went to Goddard College. Well, why did you choose there?
Right.
What was the only thing that got you to Vermont?
This question has legs forever. I wanted. One thing I really started doing in earnest in high school was writing. I became interested in trying to write poetry. Now, of course, high school, you know, poetry can be earnest, but it's kind of mawkish. And so I guess mine was sincere but mawkish. And I told, again, my mother, who was an English, you know, like language arts person, I was interested in writing. I told my father, and my father said, yeah, you can major in English if you want to, but you're not going back home when you can't get a job. And he wanted me to go to a big traditional university. Back then they said that you either went to, like they call Goddard a hippie school, and big schools are like straight schools or, you know, orthodox places. My father said, Notre Dame would be a good place for you. But my mother, I got a catalog from Goddard, because back then, you know, you wrote away for everything.
Yes,
And I said, this looks like someplace I would like. And my father said, no. But my mother said, well, you're in 11th grade, I have a year to work on it. So she really kind of chipped away and said, if you send him to a huge school, he'll drop out and then I probably would be earned somewhere if I dropped out of school in my parents' house, because college was not, it was not an if, it was a where.
Right,
you were
right,
going.
sure.
And you didn't want my father bad. You know?
Okay.
He was, like Coltrane would play a lot of arpeggios, like that. My father was Miles. He'd give me like 3 words every 6 months. and they were like, you're going to school.
Wow.
Boom. And so, yeah.
Yeah, so it was guided, though. Right?
Yes. Yeah, it was the right place for me. And I also started doing radio there.
Right,
so,
they had all that, the radio stuff.
Right.
What got you in the radio there? Did you seek it out while you were up there?
A friend had a show, a dorm mate, and she said it was Allen Ginsberg's birthday. So she said, well, okay, if you read these poems in the first hour, I'll put some music underneath you. So I read stuff from like how The Fall of America had just come out, so it was like 74 around that time.
Okay.
So I'm reading these, and that's an hour. The next hour, she said, do you want to do the hour? I'll run the board. So what I did was, I said yes. I tried to imitate, like you and I were talking earlier. Radio people have influences just like musicians. So I tried to imitate the people I heard on WHUR, which was a jazz station at the time. So it's night, like you're young and you got like Coltrane, and you're trying to be like, well, this is John Coltrane from 1966. I'm trying to do all that late night, like I'm so Afro-introspective, this kind of shit. So that got me hooked, and I thought, this is fun. Yeah. And it was a way of sharing this thing which has always been so close to my heart.
Okay.
And my dorm mate said, you're pretty good at this. She taught me how to run a board. And back then you had to have to do it yourself, you had an FCC license. Right. So that summer I studied I thought you could get a third and that would be okay, but I got second class.
Oh, wow.
Which impressed my father.
Sure,
because, the daydreaming, my son did something practical, I'm so happy. And that was, so then from then on I had, during my time at Goddard, I had a radio program. It's called Stardust Program. And the theme was, some of you might know that version of Stardust. It's on a record called Salt and Pepper. Sonny Stitt and Paul Gonsalves. It's this beautiful, kind of ultra romantic version of Stardust. And I played it. So the show was 8 till midnight. So 12:50, 12:54, you start playing it. And the snow stuck. I mean, I'll put it like that.
How many days were you on the air at that time?
Twice.
Twice a week?
Twice a week.
Okay.
Well, you're 18.
Right, absolutely.
You're pumped up. You're away from home.
No,
And then else to do, you're in the hills of Vermont.
Yes.
And it was a good place to just kind of, share this, sharing music.
Yeah. We're going to come back to Vermont a little bit later on, but you graduated from Goddard and come back to D.C.
I came back to D.C., yeah.
What did you do? What was your first gigs coming back?
That was, I think I was the saddest person in my family when I graduated, because you find a community. I don't know if you lived this way. I hope you did not. But I kind of had a life for like my parents, and then there was this inner life which had begun to blossom. So it's like music, literature. I had friends I could stay with late at night in the dorm, and we talk about passages from Emile Zola novels and stuff like that. And so I'm graduating, and my family's happy. My father's happy. I didn't know this at the time, but I was the first person on my father's side of the family to graduate from college. So he's thrilled, and I'm thinking, you're in your early 20s, and you think, am I ever going to find a community again? Of course, I couldn't say this, but inside, you're at a party and everybody's glad, hey, you're in the back, and I'm crushed. But so I came back to DC, and I kind of floundered around a bit. I kept playlists in my head, radio playlists in my head, and I would pretend I was on the air. It kind of helped keep me sane. Then I started working. I worked part-time at the Air and Space Museum in the gift shop. I started grad school here. Because my mother suggested, well, think about maybe getting a master's in library science because you're bookish and you got to do something.
Here at UDC?
Here at UDC, yeah.
Okay.
And my father was, I was at home for a bit and he was kind of getting impatient. What are you going to do? You know, you're not in Oz anymore. So that's really how I started. I didn't know what was to come with the Smithsonian down the road.
Right. So you got a master's in library science?
Right.
I remember reading an article, I think it was from City Paper, maybe some other venue, about working in a library and the experiences that was.
Oh gosh, that's a little bit.
Yeah, Ancaster. Tell us about that, because that was very moving. It really was.
Well, let's see. I'll give you the abridged version, but so I got my master's, and my next job at Smithsonian was I worked in library acquisitions, which is, as it sounds, you acquire books, you know, serials, monographs for all the Smithsonian library branches. DC Public Library was hiring. And after I left there, I went to African Art Museum, worked as a library assistant. There were two of us, Janet Stanley, who I think is still the branch librarian, and myself, when African Art was on Capitol Hill. So I did that, but I wanted to, you know, make more money. DC Public was hiring. So from 1987 to 89, I was a children's librarian in Anacostia. And I think, you know, hindsight is always perfect. You don't need glasses with hindsight. I thought to be a children's librarian and you just kind of sit there and students coming after work, after school rather, and they'd say, well, I'm looking for a book about this. I thought that was the alpha and omega of the job. But you're not. You're like being a teacher, you're a father figure, you're a lot of different things. And the younger patrons liked me, the teenage boys could not stand me. You know, this job was not, they tell you, men don't do jobs like this. And so I had like this kind of split relationship. Let's see, a kid pulled a gun on me toward the end of my time there. And that's a whole nother, you know, I need like a couch. Where's my therapist? Doctor, I need a couch. But not long after that, well, I was still at Anacostia, but the Smithsonian had acquired Duke Ellington's papers, and a friend of mine who worked for Smithsonian Library sent me, this is like, I'm dating myself, but, you know, like a paper copy of the job announcement. And she said, this is perfect for you, and I thought, yeah, this is like getting you know who Regina King is? I said, yeah, this is like getting a date with Regina King. I'm not going to get this job. But I knew my friend would bug me if I didn't apply for it. But
you did.
I did, yeah.
You did.
So 20 years.
You were, wow. You know, and tell us about what your experiences were like there, what you did, and what was it, you know, that really pulled you in. And how much were you into Ellington before you got that job?
Okay.
Well,
again, my father and his friends listened to Ellington. And, you know, they knew, I'll call them the standards, you know, Mood Indigos. But my father also had records like The Far East Suite.
Sure.
He had Such Sweet Thunder. So I had some working knowledge of the stuff in addition to like the hits and the standards. So there was that, and at the time, a lot of those recordings are out of print, but I was a person with, you know, I ended up with like skid marks on my MasterCard, because you try to find rare recordings, and you say, oh, you can get it. There was no internet back then, so you couldn't, but I would hunt things down, or I'd go to the Library of Congress and stay all day and read interviews with Ellington. So a lot of it's like family and love and interest and determination to learn more. As far as I was hired to catalog the sound recordings in the collection, but I think one of the beautiful things about archival work is that you're working with other people, of course, who are processing materials. So you could look at scores and business records and that kind of thing. I was really fortunate in that one of my, still a good friend, a colleague, Marilyn Graskowick, would keep me on the straight and narrow. because I would see like a Strayhorn score, some piece I'd heard of, like Maryland in the fifth measure. There's like this 11th chord, this out of Debussy. You know, it's like 10 o'clock, and at 11 o'clock, I'm going, Maryland, look at this chord. And she said, Reuben, you have a job to do. So there's like the romance of it, but you have, you know, your responsibility is to make things accessible for researchers. And so it was processing the collection, or assisting in processing the collection. We'd give talks at symposia, you know, that kind of thing. Hindsight is really something else. I said this once before. I'm thankful for this path, but you couldn't plan a job like this. You know, a student once asked me if this was part of my 5-year plan. And if I had come out of the womb saying, yeah, in 1989 I'm going to get this job working with the Ellington collection, I'd have been doing something else. It doesn't. You can arrange things in your life, but those curveballs, you know, occur. And the more I think about Duke Ellington, I think the less I know in a way, because I think I have a better understanding of how broad his contribution was and is. But the person, I think he was affable, but he kind of kept the world at bay. But to have had access to that material on a daily basis and to work with people, the people I've met, because, you know, I'm a kid from Northwest DC sitting on the stoop, and you see things, you know. I daydream. I saw people, you know, like your kid, members of the Nation of Islam would come by and they tell you stuff. I saw fights. I mean, friends die. And maybe like the second year at the Ellington, you know, Smithsonian, I'm in Denmark at a conference, and I said to a friend, excuse my English, what the hell am I doing here at this banquet? And like the king and queen of Denmark come in, and I'm like, I'm just this dude from Fifth Street. And it's not about ego, it's like your mind is just like, but you have to, as my yoga teacher says, you have to own the incarnation. So I'm sitting there like, yeah, I do this every day. Yeah, Thursday in Copenhagen. Yeah.
No, I have this real affinity for Ellington. I'll tell that next month, I guess, in terms of my experiences. I actually haven't seen Ellington perform a couple of times. You know, that's one of the blessings of being older.
Yes.
But I'll never forget, you know, because this comes back to you being a teacher also, of taking my classes to the Ellington Archive, and how gracious you were and how informative you were, showing the scores. Tell us a little bit about how Ellington would score for specific people and stuff like that. That was really some of the things that I got out of it. It was like,
Sure. That notion of personalized writing, you know, writing vehicles for, as they say in European classical music, principal soloists, you know, whether it's like Harry Carney, baritone saxophonist, or Johnny Hodges, an alto, and Ellington, and of course his arranging and composing partner, Billy Strayhorn, would do the same thing. And one of the things you always heard the musicians say was that, you know, arrangers do this. This is not new in a way, but it's the quality and the personal attention paid to, well, Ellington called it the tonal characteristics. And I've often said, and many other people have said, that, you know, the connection between Ellington's initial calling as a visual artist and I'd say the visual quality of his writing. So you look at, that's where my friend Marilyn also came in, because I would see some piece. There's a composition in 1959 Anatomy of a Murder soundtrack called Flirty Bird, which is a vehicle for Johnny Hodges. And I'm looking at this part, this is Rab, Johnny Hodges, one of his nicknames was Rabbit. And I'm reading it, and the note values are spot on, but you know, you go to a keyboard, you play, and you think, why doesn't this sound like Johnny Hodges? Well, there's a minor thing like talent and some specificity of sound, but the nuance was not there on the paper,
Yeah.
So I think, in addition to what was written, Ellington also understood that thing that's metaphorically between C and C sharp with these players. So you get these wonderful vehicles. It might be some portrait of like a mountain in Mexico or something, and he'd say, and now Cootie Williams returns for blah blah blah, whatever it happened to be, and you think it's a journey, like these beautiful journeys, and it wasn't just like some standard issue swing piece, but it might be a blues or a ballad or what have you, but you're always, I think, taken somewhere. And just Ellington, I don't know, I told a friend recently, they have these books like How to Work with Difficult People and Employees and stuff, and what a model I think Ellington remains for something like that, because you've got, that band had characters. I mean, you had musical, kleptomaniacs and curmudgeons and people with challenges, and he got alcoholics, people, but he got the best out of them. Even the people who, people got mad. They said, you stole my ideas, but they would leave and say, there's no band like this after you leave. Yeah, and you just, it's like Herb Jeffries, who sang with the orchestra in the 40s, said it's like one of the greatest examples of human communication. And I just think it's true. And then you see this guy, he's so affable. And he's, I'm listening to these sound recordings. Research your copies, because you want to make sure what's on the tape box was what you were putting on the catalog record. And, he's like flirting with journalists. And, it's like, gee, you make that dress look pretty. Or, he might say, if the interviewer was, Donna, darling, you look so wonderful tonight. We're going to play something. It's like this silver tongue, platinum tongue guy. Anyway.
Yeah, did you get a feel for the collaboration that he did with Billy Strayhorn? And what was it that he saw in Strayhorn in 38, 39 when he was in Pittsburgh? And what did Strayhorn have the audacity to do what he did? How did that work out? And how did you see that in your examination of materials?
One of the things this was pointed out to me by some Smithsonian fellows who worked specifically on trying to determine more concretely Strayhorn's contributions to the band book. But and there are a number of scores in Strayhorn's hand in the Ellington collection, which is, if you don't know, down at the American History Museum, in the Archive Center. Strayhorn's, like a lot of African American musicians, he had aspirations of being a concert pianist, and those doors were just shut. But his knowledge of, I guess you could say, traditions singular or traditions plural, and I think that merging of the knowledge from European classical music and what Max Roach called the idiom, what is produced here musically, is just incredible. So I think there was that. Ellington knew what was good too. It is still, I wouldn't say I was schooled enough to say, this person did this person did that, but I do think they needed each other.
Was Walter Vanderleer doing his research while you were there?
Right, yeah. I'm rereading his book now, by the way, Something to Live For. Yeah, right. Because I think about people like Billy Strayhorn and how, you use the term role models. Now, of course, musically you're thinking this, but these erudite individuals who knew all this stuff. And Strayhorn wrote a lot of small group pieces. He wrote vehicles for people like alto saxophonist Johnny Hodges. There's a beautiful composition which the clarinetist Barney Bigard recorded, a piece by Strayhorn. It's the translation is like blue, black, or black. And you look at it and the bridge it's like if Ravel hung out on U Street back in the day. And I'm thinking, how do you merge these beautiful voicings with that which is in, as the poet Carlos Williams would say, in the American grain? And I just look at it and listen to it, and you just snap in your forehead thinking, they did this, and they went through back doors and all that stuff. And I mean, there's so many stories within the music, and I think about the courage it took not only to forge ahead, but just the crap they went through in society, and it's all this beauty, Like Archivist said, he said jazz is it's like the lily in spite of the swamp. You're all really getting this confession time for me to make them.
Did you have conversations with Patricia Willard about the interplay among the musicians and how they would compete and how Ellington would manipulate?
Yes. Well, one of the joys of being Smithsonian for 20 years was talking with Patricia Willard, because I was gobsmacked. You're in the midst of all this material and by people you love, and I would just kind of sit at her feet and say, "Tell me stories about Johnny Hodgins," or what. And some of them were funny, some were a little blue, as my mother would say. Like, "Son, this is a blue story," but it was. I knew these musicians, but I was obviously not there when things like, like when Billy Strayhorn wrote Daydream, and somebody like Patricia Willard, who worked closely with Ellington and who was working as an oral historian at the time. I was at American History, and she knew everybody. She knows everybody.
Absolutely. For those of you who don't know Patricia Willard, I did an interview with her the last year right here. She met Ellington when she was doing publicity for Gene Norman's Club in Los Angeles in 1949. She'd already been a newspaper reporter during the war years. That's World War II, where she would review shows with Frank Sinatra. But Ellington was so impressed with her writing that he said, "Well, I want you to handle everything for me out on the West Coast." And so she became close to Ellington, but close to all of the Ellington musicians. And so close to Billy Strayhorn that when David Hadju did a biography of Ellington, of Strayhorn, she was really upset.
Yes.
She was absolutely upset. He called him an alcoholic, but we all drank back then, So she could tell you the stories. I'm disappointed she's not here tonight, because when I give her rides home, I get more stories. The Miles Davis story, or the Eric Dolphy stories, not just the Ellingtonian stories, but the interplay that you had with others coming through. Who were some of the musicians who would come through and view the content?
Well, speaking of Patricia, one Friday I came back from lunch, and this was right around the time when every year the NEA does the Jazz Masters thing, and so I'm coming back in the Archive Center. My two cubicles adjacent to Patricia's, and so standing around talking to Patricia, Donald Byrd, the trumpeter, flugelhorn, Art Farmer, the pianist, Blue Hall, Richard Abrams, and I walked in, and sometimes I'm like my favorite aunt, who's a little profane sometimes, and I just said, "Damn, half my record collection is right here next to Patricia." And she introduced me. But I was just, when you're young, something will tap you on the shoulder and say, "Let's go." And music did that when I was 2, 3, something like that. So I knew who these people were, and it's always been personal to me. So that happened a lot. Yeah. And then we'd have people come in for tours. Once we came in on a Saturday, Quincy Jones was guest conducting the Smithsonian Jazz Masterworks Orchestra, and Gunther Schuller. I mean, just a lot of people. James Newton, and to have met these people, and like I'm still really good friends with James and some of the other people who came through. It's one reason I wanted to do this, because I think this path has sustained me in ways which I haven't always acknowledged, and I just think it's no small thing, and you just keep. It's a way of. I think as an archivist, I can't play anything as well as any of these musicians, but in making their materials available, it's a way of paying back in some small way.
Sure.
These people who've given me, and I know many of you so much, You know, I could, if I could play ballads like Ben Webster, I probably wouldn't be, you know, like what, Archivist Emeritus. Baldus Africanus, or whatever. Anyway.
But you took it early out from the Smithsonian, early retirement, so you were still rather young.
Yes, yeah, December 2009.
What prompted you to move on? What was the...
Oh, Dr. Phil. No, it's okay, it's okay. You know, I was doing so many things at once. I was still at Smithsonian, and I started doing after-school work, DC Public, with DC Writers Corps. I was poet in the schools in Howard County. This is all at the same time. I think now, I'm in bed by 8:30 now. I'm thinking, how the heck did I do all this? And I was at a party one night, and a friend of mine said, do you know what you are? And I thought, oh, this is not going to be good. He said, you're a teacher with a museum job. So I think you stay in a place a long time, you can love it, but like you change, the town changes around you.
Sure.
And I thought it was time to see what else I could do or try to do. I mean, I was a little naive also, I would say.
Yeah. In terms of the economics, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Because when I started teaching, you have like sticker shock. Because, you know, you're a teacher and you've got this great quest. And teaching is in my heart. But I realized that I taught high school in Vermont for 2 years, right? And you get your first check and you think, oh, you know, and it's that freeze frame moment in your life. And I thought, Reuben, remember how much money you made at the Smithsonian? But I was fortunate in that, like my mom used to get mad at my father because he was thrifty, and she would say, your father can split a penny like 19 ways, blah, 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 blah. But some of that rubbed off, and I squirreled away. Because when you're teaching, love is one thing.
Yeah, no, I know about that. I taught as an adjunct for many years, including down here now. But I always had a day job, so I could afford it. But how long was the gap between you leaving the Smithsonian and you're going to Vermont for that teaching in high school?
I started teaching, I left, my last day at Smithsonian was New Year's Eve, 2009. So this December will be 10 years. And I started teaching in August of 2011. So I taught at the Writers Center here in Bethesda, and I was dog walking when I was, you know, I kind of, because what you don't realize too is you're in a place for a while, and there's the exhilaration of like you sleep late, you know, a few weeks, and then you wake up one day and you think, who are you? You know, and I was in a bookstore not far from here, and a fellow writer came up to me one day, and she was joking, but there was truth in it. She says, didn't you used to be Reuben Jackson? And I went, uh-oh, yeah. So then you don't know who, you know, you have to, there's something else coming, which you don't quite know. But I started teaching, so I taught August 2011 and to June 2013. I was riffed in 2013.
So you went to Vermont to teach. What compelled you to go back to Vermont?
Okay, that concludes tonight's program. I think naivete in a part. I also, part of me thought, well, because I came back after I graduated from Goddard, it's like unfinished business. And I had this romantic notion of, you know, it's like you're middle-aged, young, in the outskirts of middle age. And, Burlington reported to have been looking for qualified teachers of color to diversify the educational ranks, because the demographic student-wise is very broad. The teaching populace, not so much. So I kind of stepped into James Meredith territory.
Were you recruited or did you seek it out?
I was recruited, in part because of, I still have my certification. But there also been, for years, an effort to recruit and retain teachers of color
Yeah.
in Vermont, which is there's a high level of people leave. It can be challenging, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
But what were you teaching?
I taught English, and there was one English social studies class.
Social
American
studies.
Lit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but the students
I'm
loved
still
it.
in touch with a lot of kids.
The students loved it. I know that. I'm sure they did.
But it was
That's
like
good.
windshield wipers. You know, you're either you find yourself in a position. Okay, growing up here in D.C. Now, you know, D.C. remains a colony, and all that. But I grew up seeing, okay, like black doctors, lawyers, bakers, engineers, hustlers, you name it. And okay, I understood the demographics, but black teachers, because that's what I was, are like, that's still in progress.
Sure.
So, you know, it's the 21st century, but I made a reference to James Meredith, who was like the first student at the University of Mississippi. Now, that might be an extreme analogy, but it's Jackie Robinson territory.
Sure.
You know?
Okay.
So it was,
Yes.
so the kids, I think the classroom kept me going as long as it did because that was normal, which
Right.
meant like on Monday, the kid could love you, and then you hand back the midterm, and you give them a B minus, and they can't stand you on Tuesday.
Right.
But you're just Mr. Jackson the jerk, or you love Mr. Jackson.
Right.
I think to be a person of color, you beyond that cloistered environment, you're like the question mark, like why are you here? Black American men are feared if you're not teaching someone, like maybe a drug dealer, and so you're shouldering a lot.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't want to prolong this, but I lived in Winooski, which is like 2 miles north of Burlington, if you know Northwest Vermont. And I walked in school. Winooski is one school. It's like everything: elementary, middle, high school in one complex. I'm walking in the hallway. A lot of kids of color saw me, and they said, "Who are you?" I said, "Well, I'm doing an after-school workshop." I said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Are you going to be here long?" And they would follow it like Lint on Velcro. So,
sure.
I mean, it's funny, but on the one hand, see, I could close my eyes at any juncture in D.C., throw a rock, I could hit a black teacher.
Sure.
But
Absolutely.
you were
You were it.
it,
Yes.
and you do what you can because I love young people. But I would go home and cry because I thought these poor kids don't see themselves and things you take for granted.
Right.
And I would tell my friends, there's a lot on me here because there's what you want to do, just in terms of a profession, coupled with the weight of being the one or one of the few. Plus, I think there's a fervent denial that this kind of dynamic exists, not just in Vermont, but in the North in general.
Vermont has this reputation of being liberal and
It's more
hippy-dippy,
complicated than that.
and yet there's a lot of racism. The racism that you encountered had been.
It wore me out.
Yeah.
It really, it wore me out.
Yeah. On a positive side, your Vermont experience though was your Friday night show that I listened to down here online, the new media, Vermont Public Radio. How did that happen? Did you seek that out?
Never. My predecessors, a guy named George Thomas, and when you tell your life, it's going to be, okay, you say, life, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach till I'm 70. I was going to listen to George, had a show on Vermont Public Radio 4 nights a week. I'm going to listen to George, and that's what it's going to be. So you hear this, you think it's thunder, it's the universe laughing at your ass. Like, forget it. And George took early retirement in the summer of 2012.
Okay.
And like a lot of NPR affiliates, they reduced the number
Sure.
the day to 1.
Wow.
I was on his show his last week. The then head of programming we talked about jazz and poetry, and she says, "Well, we had this idea for a show. We'd like to talk to you about it." And I had like 19 interviews. It seemed like I had to go in and talk to people. Then I did a mock hour. I hadn't planned on it, but George and I are friends, and I said, I had to talk to him about it because I wanted to know how he felt. I thought, God, it's like I'd be dating his ex or something.
Okay, sure.
But he was okay with it,
Yeah.
and I started in late August 2012. And
Okay.
5 years, almost 6 years. Yeah. And I'm happy that the Archive of Public Broadcasting, which is they have this project with the Library of Congress. They asked VPR for. I thought they wanted a few programs from Friday Night Jazz, and I thought, oh God, don't let them do it. The early ones were kind of, you're doing the show, which was pre-recorded. You're sweating like a grand jury witness, You're following someone who's an institution. People are mad, like, what happened to George? And who the heck is this guy who's playing like Sonny Chirac on guitar? This is not jazz. Blah, 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 blah. But they wanted the entire run. So my show is going to be, it's, the Library of Congress. And I thought, so I thought about something I mentioned, this love for music. I thought about my family, and I wished. I'm still the kid who wishes I could take the finger painting home and show it to them. And I thought, God, I can't tell them, but I'm glad. It means a lot to me that because it was still, I was the first on-air person of color. Usually I was 41 years old.
Wow.
But no one will really admit this.
Right.
And not that I wanted people to walk down the hall and say, hey, you're the first person of color on the air. But I would go to grocery stores. One day I was there, and this African-American woman, she was 70, I know because she told me. And she said, I'm at the deli counter, I got like a half a pound of egg salad or something. And she said, baby, for 3 hours every Friday, I'm not here. And I mentioned this in a staff meeting. People thought, what the heck does that mean? And I'm sharing this with you because it happened, but it, I think, illustrates, it's like the singularity of a voice and a place. And people would say, well, that must have really hurt your feelings. She thought she wasn't here. And I said, no, she's black. It means she feels right. But
quite the opposite.
But that's one part of I'd say like the strain of being demographically unique. And it just kind of, I was either, the show was well received, and I don't know if you've been to Vermont, the state is a small town. So anywhere you go, and if you're on the air, people, if they don't know who you are visually, like if I said to you, I'd like a half a pound of chicken salad, people would think, you're that guy. You're the guy on the air.
Yes.
And they would say the kindest things, but you also had that, and then maybe you're going home from the store and the police follow you.
Right.
So your life is like windshield wipers, and there's not a lot of middle ground. So you're either, and I tell people, they say, no, the cops didn't follow you because you're the guy on VPR. The cops didn't. So anyway, no. So I get naming rights to all this white hair. There are people who are like this. I'm sorry, but
so there are issues compelling you to come home to DC.
It was time to come home for many reasons, and little by little things kind of, when it starts to rain, like 2 drops hit the windshield, then 6, and I thought one thing that really struck me was I came home for Labor Day 2017, and I'm coming out of the Busboys and Poets on 14th and V, and I see all the people dining, and most of the people were black. And I thought, what if you stay somewhere, Vermont, long enough, and it gets to a point where this is not normal to you? And I thought, ooh, I can't do this. And I did not, I know for many people race is a social construct and all that, but I said to a friend one night, I just started crying, and I said, I cannot die estranged from my people. I cannot do it. And DC has changed a lot, but like this place kicked my butt, but it raised me. It's in my heart, radio, everything. And a dear friend died like a year ago this time, a poet, filmmaker named Jackie Jones. and I was here. In fact, tomorrow, the interview for this job was like the 5th. So tomorrow, last year, I was here, like, sweating in an interview. Life, you don't know, right? But I was at Jackie's funeral. She grew up in Memphis, but she was raised here. She died here. And this stuff started coming out of me at the church, like, well, yeah, she died at home. That's the thing you're supposed to do. Well, I'm talking about her, but I know I'm talking to myself.
Okay.
And I thought, you don't need, what Bob Dylan say, it doesn't take a weatherman. You know which way the wind blows.
Which leads us to your poetry. What you started writing poetry as a kid, even?
Poetry. Consciously, when I was in 10th grade, my homeroom teacher edited the school newspaper.
Okay.
And her name was Miss Milbury. One Friday she came to me and said, we need a poem for the next issue of the paper. And I thought, so I said, well, who are some of your favorite poets? I thought she meant, so she'd say, well, go get like 3 Gwendolyn Brooks or something. She said, no, you write it. And I thought, so I deliberately tried to write the worst poem I could so that she'd leave me alone. So there was some of you may have taken typing class in school. There was a woman who sat in front of me. She had one of those, like on the Afro Sheen commercials, like her afro was flawless. This beautiful, like this Afrocentric halo. So I wrote this piece called like Ode to the Sister with the Most Perfect Afro. And it was like this pseudo last poets. We're the last poets. Like, I would cross the Congo to run my fingers through your hair, blah, blah, blah. And I thought she'll leave me alone. So I handed it to her and she said, oh, this is good. I need something from you every month. And I thought, mess this up. But I found myself enjoying it.
Okay.
You know? And I guess like with musicians, you read and you find some degree of influence.
Sure.
So I would try to imitate just a weird swath of people. Like it might be Sonia Sanchez, but I tried to read Dylan Thomas, and I would take words out of the thesaurus. In typing class, when you're supposed to be doing these exercises, I would say, maybe I can get truculent into the 3rd stanza. So I think I'm the only person in the history of DC Public who flunked typing. Because I was trying to write poems in class. You know? So by 11th grade, I was swinging the bat trying to write poetry. And this is where, and I mentioned earlier, my father was like, yeah, okay, yeah, no, I just redid the basement. You're not coming back home to sleep in the basement. But I was stubborn, and I had my mother's support with the whole language arts. My mom also wrote poetry.
Okay.
And you know, when you're younger, you think you're not like your parents.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
my mom died November 2006. She had Alzheimer's. And so we're at the funeral, and the church clerk stands up and says, you know, we think about Sister Jackson's contributions to First Baptist. She started the poetry club here, and, you know, she encouraged young people, creativity. And my brother goes like this, like, you know, his music is variations on the thing. I thought I was like doing this thing, and I realized like, no, it was there. And now I see it as, it's a little corny, but like the baton was passed.
To you,
and
right.
I'm more like my mom every day anyway, so I think it's, yeah.
So you've had a book of poetry published already?
My first book came out in, close to about 1847, 1991,
Okay,
Fingering
right.
the Keys.
Right,
and
right.
it's going to be reissued in
Fantastic.
October
Okay.
with newer work. the book is called Scattered Clouds. So it's, but yeah, the book came out in '91, and I do make these jokes about it, like, because I was tutoring this young man, and he said, "What's it like knowing you're got to go on tour and stuff again?" And I said, "Well, back in '91, we just get like a Conestoga wagon, and we would like ride into town, you read a poem, you go to the outskirts,
What about
light a
other,
fire, you know."
other magazines or publications? What did you?
Poetry?
Yeah.
Oh goodness, yeah. Gargoyle. A lot of anthologies. I mean, like 40 something. I've been very fortunate as a poet because I didn't, in a way, I didn't try. I mean, I did. I tried to write, but people, like in Duke Ellington's Music is My Mistress. He said he walked like 2 blocks and someone says, "Go this way." So then he'd go 3 blocks this way, and someone he'd get to an intersection, and somebody would say, "Go this way." So I've been helped by the generosity of people who would point, try to, we'd like to publish this. The greatest thing the word has given me is the opportunity to work with other voices.
Sure.
And whether, as they say on those cartoons, kids of all ages.
Sure.
And then there's, of course, the writing about music that I wrote for the Washington Post and Jazz Times. And so once, to bring my family back into this quickly, when I would have those little reviews in the Washington Post, like those 6-inch reviews, my mom would go ballistic. She'd go crazy. She'd call all her friends. And I asked my brother, why is she so hyped up about 6 inches of a review? Well, my mother wanted to be a print journalist.
Oh, wow.
So she saw
your son,
one of her.
She saw her son printed.
Yeah. And I heard my brother say it, but I hear it now. And I think, wow.
Yes, absolutely. So reviewing. So, but you use, it's very hip to disparage social media and particularly Facebook, but you use that very effectively for your poetry.
Well, I call it like kind of talking to yourself out in front of a lot of people.
Sure.
And
so, tell us about this barber in Detroit.
Amir.
With Khadija.
Bless
Tell
his
us
heart,
about
bless his
Amir
heart.
and Khadija.
Okay.
Well, comes later. First Amir and Khadija.
I was trying to, when I taught at the Writers Center, I had a student who worked a lot with persona. She created these characters. And I'd never done it. And I think it's important to try and challenge yourself. So I thought, you've never really done this before. And so I created these composites. Amir Yassin, who was a barber, late 70s, lived in Detroit, and he kind of a sweet guy, kind of a curmudgeon. And he fell in love with the CEO, Khadija Rollins. And of course, Rollins is from Sonny Rollins. I'll just tell you that now. But watching, it was really the first time I had written, I would say, love poems. Okay. And so you could say it was either both a cover and it provided a vehicle for some expression I'd never really, I don't think I was ever that good at. And what happened though was that, you know how it is with writing, it takes on a life of its own.
Sure.
And so I'm in Vermont, and I get a call from the arts editor. It's called 7 Days, which is like the Washington City paper here. And he said, we want to do an article about this couple because people, it's caught up. And so I said, okay.
Right.
And so we met, and I said, well, I'm not, I can't really answer for them. But he had his premise, Dan Coles is his name, and if you go to 7 Days, it's still there. But he had respect for the relationship.
Okay.
And so I explained that I was Amir's, like his Boswell, his chronicler. So he would do something, he'd say, write this down. Like he fell in love with Khadija, and people would say things like, between clients, he'd go in the alley behind the barbershop, and they'd hear him like singing Luther Vandross ballads. People say, I heard you singing A House Is Not a Home in the back. And so he would come back to his chair, take the straight razor, and just go like that. Like, don't mess with me. But, so those kinds of things would happen. And I didn't really understand the extent to which writing can impact people.
Sure.
But one day I was in the grocery store, again, at the deli counter. And this woman had read the story in 7 days, and she said, I read that poem Amir wrote to Khadijah when she was away at this conference, and my husband started crying, and I started crying. She says, I really hope they stay together. So it's kind of funny, but you realize that there's this bond,
right.
and you
really,
yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. And so when Amir passed, all of the condolences that you got on Facebook were just incredible.
Yeah, he died in his sleep.
You know,
and you know, people were hard. People mad at me still.
Yeah.
Just that kind of.
It was just brilliant. I'm just so knocked out. I just, you know, I knew. Because I know you. You know, I knew. But it's like I was flying into, it was like flying into Jerry Washington as the Bama talking about his girlfriend when I knew his wife was Japanese and they were still together, you know. But I was buying into it, you know. But, yeah, absolutely. You know, it was brilliant. But why Detroit? I mean, you really picked the persona so well, you know, and that distance was so effective.
I think Detroit is an epicenter for a lot of African American history.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's like the poet Robert Hayden, someone I love a lot, is from Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
The music. I think Detroit is still undervalued as a music center. I mean, just so many things. You know, Aretha Franklin grew up in Detroit. The Nation of Islam was started in Detroit. I mean, just a whole bunch of stuff. And I thought, I also wanted some geographical distance.
Okay,
because if I had said Northeast DC, and people did it anyway, like, the question was, are you a mayor? Is it really?
Right. Or people Googling the barbershops in Detroit.
Oh, yeah, and it's like, well, is there a hang-time barbershop in Detroit?
Really? No.
Is there a Amir Yassin working here? And, you know, I was torn between uttering what Gustave Flaubert said during the Madame Bovary obscenity trial, which is Madame Bovary c'est moi, or just smile. I usually just smile, you know. But I mean, I'll say as far as the tone of the relationship, saxophonist Archivist, this is one of my favorite quotes, said, I passed through the insipid panorama of Americana with an enormous romanticism. It has never left me. So that was like part of the guiding force. And one of the things the editor at 7 Days said too was that this kind of caught fire not long after the, you may remember the 2015 election. So people were looking for something optimistic after, you know, was his name got elected.
So Kelly, you're up front with being a persona, right? Who's Kelly? Tell us about Kelly.
Yeah. Kelly, I think, is less, he's flintier, you know, and, but I needed a vehicle for, and I'm just saying, you know, the trauma, which I also experienced growing up. Like, there are poems in which he discusses going to the movie theater with a friend of his, and, you know, they're watching, like, Charles Boyer movies. So it's like two young black men dreaming of wearing Botany 500 suits, and the music is beautiful. It's like Michelle Legrand is playing, and we're thinking, is it possible for black people to do this, knowing they leave the theater and they have to figure out how to get home because, like, the dudes who want to take your money are waiting. So how do you encapsulate your heart and, or as they said in the Duke Ellington book, the raw and the cooked. So you know, you're dreaming in the theater, but you got to get home to make sure your butt doesn't get kicked. And so he's more of a vehicle for that. He loves waltzes, so if you read the Kelly pieces, each line is 3 words, so it's a nod to 3/4 time, you know. and he'll read, you know, he'll say things about his first slow dance with Francine, and she said, you know, he asked her if he could dance with her, and she says, "Oh, take your butt home and go read some irreverent book that nobody else cares about." And he said, "But so I walked home quietly." You know, I think he's freer with his emotions than Amir was. Amir was like a late blooming romantic, and he found, as people say, you got your heart cracked open. He got his heart cracked open. So he died happily, but I didn't know where else to take that that character. So I mean, I miss him too.
Now, is there a possibility of poems being anthologized? I mean, you know, it's like they're out there in the Facebook ether or whatever, but having them all together, what's the possibility of doing it?
It's possible. I think.
Yeah.
I have them collected in a document, and I think they're getting better too. Because like with anything that's new, you're a little bit, you know, it's a little stiff in the beginning, and you like learning how to cook something. But we'll see what happens. I don't know what I would do without a vehicle like Kelly, you know, because he's a servant, he's romantic, he's a nerd, you know, he'll say things like that. You know, he'll talk about, well, I went to, you know, a friend's house and played a B flat 7th chord on the first position. I thought about the moon, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's, I mean, I'm not going to BS you. That's me.
Right.
You know, and my friends and I we taught ourselves how to be impassive. So if you see a movie like Moonlight, when I saw it, I wept like crazy because I thought that's me. And you're dealing with like that hypermasculinity.
Sure.
And I knew like early on I loved, you know, in addition to like ballet, opera, and I thought, what the hell are you gonna do? You don't have any friends. So I would just kind of, I call it the honor guard face, where you're like, you know, and maybe you see somebody you're in love with, say, oh, I heard you like so-and-so, and you say, she all right. Well, I'm at home writing like 8 zillion sonnets.
Right.
And, but you can't, I don't know, you can't carry those suitcases forever. So I think it's like it blew up, and processing that path has been helpful. Just like, you know, radio was a way for me is to burn off, you know, sharing.
Sure.
Yeah, I was always scared. Like, I'd say, well, my grandmother on my father's side, she always dipped snuff. So she had like this big thing in the, you know, chaw right here. She said, baby, you got big feelings. I'm going to pray for you. Because, you know, you walk around like this, it's rough. And, you know, you play sports and all, you kind of got to cover. But so there's like that, I can knock you on your butt. But then I might go home and listen to Verity and cry, you know. So, well, you all know everything.
Yeah, no, but Facebook is marvelous for disseminating your poetry. I just really am enthralled, you know, and I really value that vehicle. You know, it's easy to disparage right now. It's got a lot of negativity about it, but it's been wonderful for me to connect with musicians throughout the world.
Sure.
And to read about Amir and Khadija, really. But let's bring it here now. Now you've been here not quite a year in the archives.
Right, it started in May 1st.
Tell us about the archives for folks who are maybe new to our audience here. Tell us about the Felix Crane Archives and how because you were around in D.C. when it was created. You helped then, and you're here now.
Yeah, I volunteered when I took early retirement from Smithsonian. So anyway, to answer the question directly, that everybody here know who Felix Grant was? Okay, yeah. Hands, my teacher's coming out again. Okay, yeah. Felix Grant was an internationally renowned broadcaster. When I heard him, he was with WMAL AM here in DC, Radio 63, the album sound. And so his collection is like the cornerstone collection for the repositories. Incredible albums with correspondence, three-dimensional materials like plaques and awards. He was celebrated, and rightly so, for his knowledge. And he was someone whose feet I sat as an 18-year-old trying to learn how to be on the radio. But so
you were able to actually approach Felix?
Oh yeah. The first summer I came home after getting my license, and I wrote him a letter to Mr. Grant. It's like Mary Tyler Moore, Mr. Grant, and you know, I wrote, said, I'm at home for the summer working. If you don't, you know, if you have time, could you please? So I come home from work, the phone rings, my parents' house, and my mother says, there's some guy named Grant on the phone for you. And so it was Felix Grant. He said, wow. He let me come by WML, and we talked about stuff. And I wrote him throughout my time at Goddard. In fact, some of my correspondence is in the correspondence series here. So I think I got proof. It's not fake news. So yeah, but what's fascinating and rewarding for me, not just, you know, working on material like Felix Grant, working with researchers, but having a hand in making accessible. For example, we recently acquired material connected with the old Capital City Jazz Festival. So it's like business records, posters, that kind of thing. Well, one of my first paid writing jobs was doing program notes for that. So, you know, you're working on this, you're organizing this stuff, and you think, wow, you did that. But it's seeing the history of your home reflected in events, and you continue, I think, to learn about the business.
Because I was going through there one day before you came down, in fact, and there's a profile of me by a guy, and what's the name of that paper? It was before City Paper.
The Unicorn Time.
Unicorn Time. Yeah. The guy didn't even use his own name. He had a pseudonym, Eddie Bronx.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right.
And it was right next to a review that you wrote.
Oh, that Miles Davis.
The Miles Davis
review.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember that.
You juxtaposed together in the archives.
Been chasing music a long time.
You know.
But it is to see, what is it? There's a poem by Michael S. Harper, History is Your Own Heartbeat. So you look at, you know, publicity materials, say for Cap City, and names of clubs which don't exist anymore, but were integral to the showcasing of jazz in the city, like Child Herald, Top of the Foolery, places like that. And I mean, the other thing I kind of think about in a tongue-in-cheek way is you get older and more your sentences begin with, didn't that used to be, or didn't so-and-so used to, but to see it, it's a source of, well, it's history and it's important stuff, and I think there are many gems in the archives, and one day people will really understand. I think it's beginning to happen, to understand the importance jazz has always had here in this city. You know, and you can see the changes in the material, whether it's like the board of the Cap City Jazz Festival, who was around then, you know, or that you see Marion Barry in the concert program. Well, this is all history now. Sure. And you look up one day and, you know, so much becomes past tense. But to, again, to make it accessible and so that people can have a better understanding of, for example, you know, you go to a festival, it's great, the lights, you see all these people. I knew this intellectually, but there's a heck of a lot of work involved in putting a festival. Budgets, fight with banks for loans, that kind of thing. So there's, I think, Archivist, you know, part of you is like emotion, and the other part is like the impassive side, like you get this done. But as someone who is soaked in this place, that this side always pauses every now and then and goes, wow, I knew this person or that. So it's, I feel lucky to have a second chance, you know,
So
I'll
what
make it
kind,
mawkish on you here.
what kind of inquiries? What do people do when they want to research something here? What happens?
Well, they'll, you know, people call even
Uh-huh.
now, or they'll email and say, I'm looking for information connected with this. And, I mean, of course, those of you who do reference of any kind know that sometimes the question will be like X, and what they're looking for is maybe like X squared, like maybe there's a little more this way and not just that direct question. So the reference interview, you know, tell me more about what you're looking for. The fun thing, of course, for me is when people are looking at questions about recordings, and so you answer, and in any case you answer the question as best you can, but then the next half hour is, I think jazz people need a chance to burn off knowledge about stuff. So it's like, oh, well, do you know this record when it's like Donald Byrd did 2 takes of Stablemates, but then he had like a tuna sandwich, and oh yeah, like take 3 they stopped because he said, damn, I got like mayonnaise on my lapel, you know. And so for me, it's the joy of trading forward.
For sure.
And I say this with like fellow nerds.
Yes, absolutely. So there's also an online presence with the archive here.
Yes, yes.
Battery down.
I talk so much, the battery.
Boy,
Okay, that's it. Bye.
so I guess I want to make an announcement before we open for questions. We have 2 books out now about DC Jazz. One has been out for a while called DC Jazz that I have a chapter in about jazz radio, and John Hassey has a chapter about Ellington. Reuben Jackson has a chapter about integrating Washington, and so we you know, that made it part of the program here. There's another book coming out. Sandra Butler Truesdale is one of the co-editors on that, and that'll be coming out this month. You know, detailing here. And I think that's another aspect of the focus of the archive, looking for more of the focus on Washington, D.C., since it's Felix Grant Jazz Archive. And with a new microphone now, we can open it up for questions.
Yes, yes.
From the audience. So, you know, I know we've covered everything. But I know you have to, go ahead. Yes.
Is Khadijah still writing?
You know, not as much. I think a lot of, she just kind of withdrew after, you know, her, because, you know, Amir Khadijah went to Barbados on vacation, and there was some questions to whether they got married, and they did, but she's, yeah. But it's sporadic. Yeah. It's also hard to, what's that old Barry Manilow song? Trying to get the feeling again. I'm not gonna sing it, don't worry about it. I thought he was a jazz archivist, so I ain't talking about Barry Manilow. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a question about poetry. You know, I practice that.
Yes.
Suspect art myself. I know you talked about creating personas to do
Right.
certain things. Do you just find yourself overhearing a conversation on the bus or the metro, and you hear 2 words and you think, it's like when you said you wanted to put truculent into.
Yeah.
And so you go around for weeks thinking, okay, I got to use that. I have no idea how it's going to get contextualized.
Sure.
Or like, I've had this experience where this is the perfect last line. Now all I need is all the rest of them.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Have you had this experience?
All the time. And I think the metro is, I tell people, like, the best poetry isn't necessarily in anthologies. It's like the 3rd car on the green line at 5 o'clock, and somebody says something, you know, or I take the 86 bus into Rhode Island Avenue Metro, and some of the conversations are just, you know, yeah. But it's like you kind of stockpile them, and maybe when the right moment comes along. But I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, just the other thing about the metro, the train.
Yeah.
It has the rhythm of what I want to write before I even get the words. I write more on the train, or at least drafts. I mean, I get started there, and then of course I go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true too. Sometimes I'll just, I saw an interview recently with the singer Sam Cooke, and it was with Dick Clark. I guess it was on American Bandstand. And, Dick Clark asked about writing, and Sam Cooke said the key is observation. So I watch people on the Metro, or I mean, the other day, this guy got on at what is that, Union Station, and I guess I can say this. This really beautiful woman walked by, and he just said, "Damn." And I thought, and I thought, it might not literally come out in a piece, but that feeling was there. So these vignettes pop in front of you, and you think, where am I going to use this? So, with observation, and I'm just, people on the Metro don't talk much, but I'm just going, that's like a sonnet right there. Anyway.
Thank you.
Sure.
I hope you don't take this one. But who are the Kelly people? What is the Kelly people? Is that something we're in already?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Can you speak up, please?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Kelly is, Kelly Donaldson he's like a composite. And I started writing these pieces and putting them on a Facebook page. So it might be, some comment about current events. Like one of the most recent ones had to do with the governor of Virginia, and he said something about, he made some comment like, well, I told a woman I haven't published this one yet though, but it's like I told a woman at a party I was Denzel Washington. And it's not the same as being in blackface. But so he'll talk about something like that, or it'll be some recollection of romance or something like that. So he's an outlet again, I think, for observation. Some is semi-autobiographical, but you'll see like Kelly writes Coleman, or Kelly on his first slow dance, or Kelly on the price of mango sauce, whatever it is, yeah. So it's kind of fun for me, because these times kind of drive me nuts. I can't watch CNN and watch 8 people talk about, what Robert Mueller had for lunch, and nothing happens. And, I pull out the little hair I had left. Anybody?
Yeah, exactly.
Reuben, on your Vermont show on Friday nights, I would listen sometimes, and I would think about you and knowing how eclectic you were, but you had a really long leash. Because it was supposed to be a jazz show, right?
People still ask this question. Yeah.
And the next thing I know, there's an R&B piece coming out.
That's why I'm here now.
That was funny. Did they know what they were getting?
They probably still don't know what you're talking about. You're not the first person to say this, and a lot of what I tried to do was this. One of my arguments is that, there's a relationship between what's called jazz and the American popular song, right? So you've got the established or the accepted vehicles, Jerome Kern, people like that. But I often felt and still feel that people, whether it's like Tom Bell with Philadelphia International, these are American popular songs. So I would play them the same way someone would play like Frank Sinatra. Sometimes I was being rebellious, I would admit that. But, and sometimes it might be because a quote jazz musician was like the trumpeter or the bassist or something. I wasn't trying to do it, but it did anger some people. And they would say, you don't know what the heck you're doing. I'm a little bit like, the character of the Hulk. So there's like David Banner, and he's sitting, and you're trying to be nice, and you're at your desk, but then like a green bicep will pop up. And I would try to control him, and it would just, no. Like when Prince died, there was a lot of stuff on the jazz program was listserv, like how to honor Prince. So someone might say, well, you know, there's like the Blue Note plays Prince, there's this, and then someone else from California said, the best way to honor Prince is just to play him. So the first hour, you know, I played some of the more well-known things like, you know, Kiss, Raspberry Beret. Like people, if I may be so colloquial, people lost their minds. They're like, well, what is this dude doing? But I felt like I had to do it. It was, I think my epitaph will read, he meant well. I meant well, you know, and, but I'm kind of musically pent up, so sometimes I get a little, and, you know, I might throw in, like the 11 o'clock hour, they say, why is Luther Vandross on this show? But I think a lot of it became, you realize that the program is not for you, it's for other people. But I do think in many ways those programs were, I was emotionally homesick, and it would sneak in sometimes. And I would say, I told somebody once I thought the show should have been called like Saxophones Over the Mountains, because I'd hear, you know, some beautiful falsetto, and then when the show was over, it was gone, and I would grieve, you know. And so I tried to keep the balance, but just think of the Hulk metaphor, just like, you know, and that weird music they play on that show. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I want to follow up that scope question with a nerdy librarian question. Talk a little about the scope and the kinds of services you provide at the archive, scope of the collection and the services you provide, and where you'd like to see either of those go. And so just pick whatever part of that you think you'd like to talk about at this point, at being here.
Yeah. Oh boy. Well, as I kind of said before, anything, you know, it's all music connected, even if you're talking about invoices or business records or things like that. But maybe this is not really what you're asking. The music, the more overtly kind of stated music questions, I really love, and talking about recordings. And lately there have been a lot of people looking for particular recordings. Sometimes they may want a scan of a musician on an album cover, but the interaction, the communion with other people is what I love the most. I mean, that's a little general. I apologize for that, but for me, it's a chance to talk about the collections, you know, whether, again, it's like Cap City or someone like Richard Harrington, who wrote for the Style section, has materials in the archives. For me, it all kind of comes down to this, and this is true for radio. When I was a kid in the basement. Like, we'd listen to records, and so they were the hit records. I was a kid who would say, if you turn that Smokey Robinson over, side B, there's like a cello in the fifth bar, and my friends like, oh, okay, here it goes. So, but I'm still that person, and my radio programs were, I said, well, these are just high-tech versions of what took place in the basement. So the reference interaction is the same thing, you know, talking to people, and it's not always, I don't nerd out on people as much as I'm kind of making fun of myself, but I could tell you how much I love music, but it's not close to what, you know, what it means. And I mean, I'll be even more personal. I was in therapy one day, and the therapist said, I want you to go home and count the number of literature-related books you have, and then count the number of music books you have. And I don't know if you even on TV, if you watch the stereotype of like a therapist. So she said it kind of, they give me that cryptic smile when the hour is up, like, ha, I see you know. So I go home and I'm counting all the music, and I thought, whoa. And I went back the next week and said, you know, I did what you said. And she says, what's the ratio? I said, well, there are many more music books. And she just went like this. And it's not that one is more than the other, but music. I mean, music has really, I don't want to get mawkish, it saved me. And it hit me, again, like I said, so early. So to have a job that's connected and to talk to people, and I think jazz people don't get, a lot of people don't get us, but when you get a chance to help and meet people, and as I said, most importantly, my touchy-feely stuff notwithstanding, to make it so that that the records exist long after I'm on, like an urn on somebody's mantelpiece, right? And one day they'll say in 100 years, we finally got national health care, whatever it is. But, that's the thing for me. That's like, as Lester Young would say, that's a spark of my heart. Oh, Lord, I can't believe I'm saying all this stuff out loud. Okay, we're done for tonight.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
As a Washingtonian and a cultural influencer through the things that you've done, DC is changing. How do you think the Archive Center and what you can do could have an impact on creating the future DC that you would like to see, and also helping, say, maybe young people through the school system, et cetera, be able to contextualize the past with the present to help create that future you would like to see?
Well, I mean, I think one of the challenges, and this is something maybe archival work and poetry have in common, is that the door is often assumed to be closed, or it's just for certain people. Like, well, we have this information, but you are working on your PhD thesis, so we don't want you here. Well, that's not why I think we do what we do. And so I would hope that there'd be a more inclusive effort to let people know that this is part of not just the city's history, but, which it is, but that it is not just for certain people, and that it's, because I think that's, like I said before, something poetry suffers from, that people come with baggage, and they think, even, people who have been out researching for a while will kind of self-efface. So I call it, and this goes back to teaching too, it's like the open door, that the door is open and come in and you can see how it is part of, well, back to Michael Harver, history is your own heartbeat. And that it's, maybe now with the demographics shifting as radically as they are, it may even be more crucial. Because I just think about jazz clubs and passing places that used to be this or that, which happens, but as memory kind of fades and maybe our attention spans get shorter, what can we do to remind people that this was, it's not about it being better or worse, but that it did exist and this was part of the trajectory. Like you don't want to just have if it's a 32-bar song, you don't just say, well, here's like 8 bars and that's it. But how does it work into the continuum, and how, it's a lot of work to do. So I can do what I can.
Just a little follow-up with that, because I was with Reuben for a little bit at the Smithsonian, and I was amazed that people didn't know that they had access to the Archive Center.
Yeah, right.
Public school teachers saying, oh, we didn't know we could go in there
Right,
and use
right.
that, and we didn't know we could bring students into that. And so I was wondering, with what you're doing now, as well as all of that, are you finding that people still don't know, not only that certain things don't exist, but that they have access to it?
Oh yeah. I think that's, as people like to say these days, that's a big part of the work is like, demystifying and saying, yeah, come on in. And boy, we could go on all night just thinking about that, just how, whether it's perception or one person's bad experience with, a repository or what have you, but I think, we're here to, I don't want to be the Maytag repairman, You know, I don't be sitting here like, yeah, I got like extra cubic feet and stuff, and cobwebs hanging from my head.
Right, right. I guess it's a matter of how to disseminate the word and the receptivity of it also. Yeah. But you had a question, yes, sir. Go ahead.
I've thought of this before many times, and being here this evening, I certainly comes to mind. Have you ever thought of writing a memoir?
Me?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much history, there's so much Washington, there's so much beyond.
I'm thinking more seriously about it. One reason I wanted to do this, and I thank Rusty beforehand, but I'm, like my grandmother would say, I'll tell the people who you are. I thank you for doing this. It's important, I think, to both like honor that which matters and to have something somewhere which, because I think I've been overly, is modest, or right? I haven't really talked much about my life, and I was so busy doing things, and I wanted to do them, but I'm kind of like the kid who, it's like you throw the rock through the window, but I would run. And you get to a point, you know, not ancient, but you start getting older and you think, well, what do you do with the experiences you had? I mean, one, you can write a memoir, which I am seriously thinking about, but also just to put something on the record like we've done tonight, because I want to honor everybody who's helped me. And I'm sorry I keep saying this, but this thing, music, has just been, it's been an incredible, it's not over, you know, but I just think, and it's not like me, I'm so great, but like the word and music have taken me places I could not imagine. You know, you're the geeky kid on the steps going, you know, I used to dream of writing liner notes when I was in grade school.
Wasn't that it? You're right. Liner notes.
You know?
And I've been writing, in fact, I just wrote liner notes for Jordan Dixon, who's a graduate of this program, did tenor sax. Writing for me is hard, just painful procrastination, you know. It's like, but it was a high school dream of mine, you know, and to have done it for a student coming out of here is just so much thrilling, to say the least.
Yeah, so I guess, you know, there's a short story by Gwendolyn Brooks in a novella called Maud Martha. The story is called We're the Only Colored People Here. Well, I was a kid, you didn't see like black people, you know, or somebody might point out somebody's name. And my father had a copy of the pianist Randy Weston's Little Niles collections, like 7 waltzes for children. Langston Hughes wrote the liner notes. I knew who Langston Hughes was, and I thought, ooh, can I do that? Can I do that? So when I was able to do it, that's what I mean, like paying like a debt to these people, some of whom I never met. But I was, you know, I was like, you think, can you do it? Because you love it. Will people laugh at me? And then growing up, you know, you love music, then you watch Walter Cronkite, they singing dogs on black people on TV. So all this stuff is going through your head, but the help of other people, I think stubbornness, it's been, yeah, I'm ultra fortunate, which is why, yeah, and I have some, you know, some other things I'd like to put down before.
Before we came in here today, you mentioned you did a workshop, counting the years, 40 years ago, with Amiri Baraka.
Right.
What was that like? Tell us about Baraka and the impact.
Sure, I mean, that's somebody, you know, so here's this guy who's a poet, playwright. He did liner notes. I remember reading like Coltrane at Birdland, which my father had.
Yes.
And so I was always looking for somebody who'd done these things. You're looking for, in a way, permission to see that you weren't by yourself. I mean, literally, you know you're not. But to have studied with him and my friend Cole Burton, we were in the same workshop in 1979 in the GW. and he could be funny. He's a little, you know, you study with an icon, but he would say things like my uncle. He'd be kind of crusty sometimes, you know, and he told me, because I'm writing poetry, he says, you know, yeah, you need to learn how to write the way people speak. Like, you got all these forsooths and stuff that you're writing. But he said, you ever heard of, and he made him, you know, the poet William Carlos Williams, but Baraka would say it quickly. It sounded like one word, like William Carlos Williams. And I thought, there's some black dude named William Carlos Williams. But that turned me around as a writer. And to me, William Carlos Williams is like my Charlie Parker in a way. I mean, there are a lot of funny stories about Baraka. I could tell you, you know, myself and Kenny Carroll and some other people did a reading. He and his wife Amina had a club in their basement house in Newark. And so it's like, you know, the revolutionary black nationalists. Baraka's upstairs. We're like sneaking around in the kitchen on a Saturday morning. And we're like peeking in the cupboards, you know. And you open the thing and it's like cornflakes. And I say, and I'm like, damn, Mary Baraka eat cornflakes. Like, is this counter-revolutionary? And of course he came downstairs and says, what are you black blacks doing? I'm like, yeah, you know, but it humanized him. I mean, but anyway, it's one of those wonderful, I guess, like blessed. I learned a lot from him as a writer, and he would tell you if you were way off base. He said, I'm not gonna tell you this is any good if it's not any good. So, this is not any good. So no ambiguity.
You got a question over there? Yes.
It's funny that tonight you're talking about all these, you know, all the many Reubens that make up Reuben. And the Reuben that I love so much, I love all of you, but the Reuben that I know best is the performer and, you know, I mean, you could be a stand-up comedian, you could be a solo performer, and, you know, Sunil's asking you about memoir. Have you thought about a solo performance, an autobiographical solo performance? Because just now,
I just did one.
I mean, come on. Or your aunt, you could channel your
Oh, I know. Yeah, I think with writers, it's not a question of finding things to write about. It's like making the time to do it. So I'm just, yeah.
Any other questions out here tonight? Oh, well. We are going to reverse this process next month. So Reuben's going to be interviewing me. So please come back, and you'll hear the other side of the story. Parallels. This white guy from Connecticut coming here to Washington, D.C. My life in the predominantly African-American community for 50 years. It's going to be fun, particularly with Reuben probably on. You know. And again, we have many programs here. We have Alan Johnson doing Meet the Artist at the Bandstand on some monthly Tuesday afternoons with various musicians that are just so informative. The dynamic is just wonderful. And of course, the big band concert in April, that's over 30 years now. This year, paying tribute to the late Chris Fidelia, the director of the Maryland program, who just passed away 2 weeks ago. So it'll be a very moving performance indeed. And I'm on the radio every Thursday night from 10 to midnight on WPFW 89.3. Reuben is heard intermittently filling in for various folks. You got any lined up?
No, it's quiet now.
We'll have to work on that also, to get Reuben on the radio here in Washington. Last comments, Reuben.
Well, just thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. There's so many people from various junctures in my life, and I've been looking forward to this, and I'm just, again, thank you. It's so wonderful to be home, and You know, many of you loved me when I did not care much about myself, and I'll never forget it. Thank you.